Hey friends, welcome to Sojo Videos. My name is Joan and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make Minecraft figures. I'm going to show you guys how to make a flower and a Minecraft sword, but feel free to make anything else you want with the same steps in this tutorial. This was super fun, and honestly it's a great idea for a handmade gift for someone else, or if you just want to decorate your room a bit more. Let me know if there's anything else you want me to make down in the comments below. Otherwise, let's just get started. Alright, so to start off, we've got some mini wooden blocks I picked up at the dollar store. We're going to start off by actually putting them together in the figures that we want and then gluing them. So first I'm going to put together my allium flower and also my diamond Minecraft sword. To do this, I just followed pictures of the actual Minecraft items, and then we're going to take our glue gun and get ready to glue the blocks together. Now starting off with the allium, I'm going to start by gluing the stem together. So I'm going to take my first block, put a bit of glue on it, spread it around, take my next block, and make sure that it aligns nicely when I put it on the block. And make sure to hold it down for a little bit just to make sure it stays glued together. And there you go, your first block's glued. From then on, I just continued the same process. One tip I'd say is to make sure you don't put too much glue on the block, just to make sure it doesn't like spread out and bleed everywhere. And also make sure that you keep the blocks aligned nicely and as straight as possible. And then you basically continue that for the rest of the stem. Now, once I finish with the stem, I'm going to start with the rest of the flower, but I'm going to try and work in sections. So I'm going to start by going row by row on the flower, then gluing all the rows together, and then attaching it to the stem. Now, this is why it's important that you keep your blocks straight as possible and aligned so that when you glue the rows together, they actually line up straight. At one point, I decided to just try gluing the blocks on one by one without first putting them into the rows, and I just did this because I realized that some of my blocks weren't starting to look that straight in the row, and this method also works too. Just kind of choose what you think is best. If you're doing this method, I would recommend trying out to see which way your block fits the best and then gluing it on. And now that we're finished with the flower, I'm going to move on to the sword. Now again, I'm going to start by working section by section, ideally row by row, and going off of the bottom of the handle, to the hilt, to the sword. And once again, if you're going row by row, make sure that your rows are straight so that when you put everything together, it lines up nicely. Now you can see here after I've glued in the little rows together on the bottom of the sword, I'm now going to glue them together with each row so that it actually makes the bottom part. And again, don't forget to not put too much glue on the block. A little goes a long way. And if just so happen you have a bit of glue that's leaked out when you put the blocks together, I kind of just scraped it off with my fingernail just to make sure it doesn't get in the way of my painting. Now that I'm done with the handle, I'm going to start on the hilt. So again, going row by row to finish up that section. Now for the last part of the sword, the actual blade part, again going row by row, gluing those blocks together and then gluing the rows together to make the actual blade. Once we're done with the rows, I'm going to glue the blade together and then also attach the rest of the parts of the sword. So to start off our painting, we're going to need our figure, some paintbrushes, water, a palette, ideally with sections, and some acrylic paint. You're going to want to try and grab different shades of the color that you're painting, or some brown or white or black to make it lighter and darker. Make sure to have some smaller size paintbrushes, and I'm going to be using a flat-edged one. Now the last time I did a Minecraft DIY, I got a lot of questions on how I picked or made my colors, so I'm going to show you guys my thought process here. Most of the time, I kind of eyeball my first go, kind of see how much of what kind of paint changes the paint in what way, makes it darker, makes it lighter, and then I continue making the other shades by adding a darker of the color or lighter of the color or adding white or brown. Make sure you make enough paint of the shade that you want because we're going to need to paint quite a few blocks and also add in extra coats. In this case, for the allium stem, obviously we're using green, and I used two different greens to kind of get the vibrancy I wanted, and then I used the dark green to make the darker shade and some white to make it lighter. Now to start off the painting, I'm going to go in with, again, a flat-edged brush and kind of put in a first initial layer on the stem. I'm only doing the first three sides so I can actually put my painting down and not smudge the paint on the other side. It's important here to do a nice first even coat, and we're going to go back in later to paint again another coat over it to make sure that you can't see the wood underneath. Again, I'm just following an actual picture of the item in Minecraft to figure out which paint goes where. Also, another note, it's okay if you accidentally paint onto another block or kind of smudge the paint a little bit. When we go in with the second coats, we can be a bit more careful about our edges and make sure that we don't accidentally paint on a block we're not supposed to. And so as I said, once we're done with the first initial coats, we're going to go in with our second coats, and this time I'm also painting the back side, which we didn't paint before. Now that we're done with the stem, we're going to start mixing our paint for the allium flower. So again, I'm starting off with just the different types of purples, and then I add more or less of the dark one and kind of play around adding the different amounts of the light or dark paint. For the purple part of the flower, I actually needed 5 different colors, so that's what I made, again from lightest to darkest. And since the flower part actually has a lot more shades, I labeled my blocks with which paint I was going to be using. This way it saved me a bit of time, so I didn't have to keep looking at my reference photo to figure out which color went where, and I could just go in and start painting. I labeled the wooden blocks 1 to 5 depending on which shade of paint I was using. And so with that system, I started off with 1s, which were my darkest color, and just painted all the ones on the flower. I also made sure to paint the back as well, since the stem of the flower was dry, so I could just hold it there and I didn't need to worry about smudging the other side. Now, one big tip that I followed painting the blocks was, since I was using a flat-edged brush, to kind of go in one direction when painting and then switch that direction to get another edge of the block. This helped me keep even lines and just kind of paint a bit more neatly around the block. And then I basically just continued that with the rest of the colors on the flower. Now again, when you're done with the first initial layer, we're gonna go in again to paint over all the blocks, just to make sure that we can't see the wood underneath and we clean up any smudges. So now on to the diamond sword. So for this one, labeling definitely helps since it's a much bigger figure. And again, I'm just labeling it from 1 to 6 this time, since that's how many shades I saw were on the actual Minecraft item. And then we can make our paint and start painting. Now for the diamond sword, I didn't really have a color that fit what I saw in the image perfectly, so I just kind of did a blue, green, and a white to try and get that light aqua effect. I also experimented with a more darker but more vibrant blue that I had to see whether it would look a little better with the paint. And once again, remember to make a bit more paint than you think you might need, just to make sure you can paint all the blocks and also add in the extra coats after. Another thing I tried to do was take the paint that I actually had and add in darker or lighter paint to keep it a similar shade. So moving on to the darker shades of the aqua, I started using my dark blue and dark green, and then also at the end added a little bit of black. And now that we have our paint and labeling, we can go ahead and start painting. Again, it's okay if your first initial coat doesn't cover the block perfectly. We're gonna go in a second time afterwards to clean up everything. Make sure to paint every little face of the blocks that you see, including the sides of the sword and the back as well. And once again, I was using my strategy of kind of changing the direction of my strokes every time I wanted to clean up one of the other corners or edges of the block I was painting. To finish up, I mixed some paint for the brown handle of the sword and then painted that as well.